everyone. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Texas Insider TV, brought to you by the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers. I'm Jim Cardle. Well, the 2019 legislative session is in the books, and legislators are fanning out across their district and across the state talking about what many analysts say is a historic legislative session with school finance reform and education reform that hasn't been redone since 1979. State Representative Dan Flynn is from House District 2. He's the chairman of the Defense and Veterans Affairs Committee, as well as a past chairman and member of the Pensions Committee. He worked on the church carry gun legislation, helped pull the Plumbing Commission out of the ditch, and had many other issues of import in the state budget. We're pleased to be able to visit today with State Rep Dan Flynn from House District 2. Well, State Rep Dan Flynn from House District 2, we appreciate you joining us today. We got a lot to cover. I know you were very active. Congratulations on having one of the most successful sessions of all the 150 representatives to accomplish things this session. But let's start with the 30,000-foot view, and that would be the budget. There's been a little discussion back and forth as to whether or not the increases in the additional spending was more than it should have been, but according to the Legislative Budget Board, it looked like a pretty good budget. Give us your thumbnail and your synopsis of the state budget if you can.
You know, one of the thing that sticks out to me most of all on the budget is when the governor signed it, he has line item approval, and he scratched nothing out of it.
Yes.
That tells you that when the big three got together and said that we were going to have a session that would take care of property tax, schools, and would balance the budget, that's what happened. And I think we met all the needs. You know, you never get all the wants, but we did get all the needs, and I'm very, very pleased. We stayed within a conservative level of that budget, and it was unanimously passed. There was one member in the House that voted against it, and that was okay. I mean, you know, everybody knew why, and that speaks well for itself. When you get both sides, R's and D's, and they'll have that kind of support for the budget, you know that you've met the needs.
And a lot of folks won't realize there were additional expenditures that are one-time needs. I've heard people say, some of your peers, it would have been financially irresponsible not to address hurricane recovery. It would have been financially irresponsible not to fund the teachers. You've been involved in the teachers and the retirement funds and the pensions. Talk a little bit about those needs.
Well, first of all, the Harvey deal was extraordinary expense that what happened, and I think everyone was concerned going in to the session that would we really be able to meet those major needs. And I'm sure there are a lot of people that would like for us to put more, but you know, when you start talking about billions of dollars that you're putting in that were unexpected expenses, that's pretty significant that we would do that. As far as the other issues that we looked at, I'm real pleased that we were able to continue to fund the State Guard of Texas, which is important because they had a big play in the Harvey recoveries, and the Special Olympics, which I have a real heart for. And we were able to do something for them, over $4 million.
Wow.
The other deal is, of course, teacher retirement. They're going to get a 13th check. They're going to be able to shore up that retirement system that I think is important. Plus, we gave money into the public education system that I think Chairman Zerwas did an outstanding job, he and Chairman Huberty. This was, I think, probably one of the best sessions that we'll see for public ed. It's the issue that comes up every session, and I have been really receiving a lot of compliments from teacher groups, the lobby, the retired groups, that we really have addressed some of those concerns that they've had.
And folks don't realize you all essentially, whether it was Senate Bill 2 or House Bill 3 through the school finance or the education reform, you essentially unpacked it, tore it all down, rebuilt it, put it back together again. This was a 20 or 30 or 40 year session in that regard, correct?
Without a question. And you know, we last session, Chairman Huberty did a great job, but it didn't make it to the other side of the Capitol. And this session, I think there was a major consensus that we were going to do it. And I think you'll find that the Lieutenant Governor and the Speaker, it was a commitment. As a matter of fact, the Speaker bought hundreds, maybe thousands of cups for the members' lounge that spelled out that was our concern. Is we're going to take care of public education,
Keep you focused.
Yes, and of course property tax. It's a little complicated, and we'd really get into the weeds if we start talking about House Bill 1, 2, and 3, because they were a group that had to be put together to be able to do it. And I think that at the end of the day, Texas continues to be a solid place. We meet needs, and I'm proud to have voted for that budget. And when you look at the fact that the governor signed it, didn't have to line item anything, and it was unanimously for the most part.
And is it correct to say the old adage, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? You possibly will need to come back, or may have the ability to come back next session to make some refinements, correct?
No question, because you never know. You know, we're in Texas. We enjoy such a great economy. And the fact is, I just came back from the Texoga convention that they had in Dallas, North
Texas Oil and Gas, yes.
And let me tell you what, we are the energy capital of the world.
Really?
And it's because we have really addressed that area. And you know, we can all be proud that the Secretary of Energy is a former governor of the state of Texas.
Yes, Governor Perry.
And certainly we want to be sure that it's something that's working all over. And as Texas goes, so goes the nation. We know that. And so that's a major part of the funding for us. And it's been successful for us. And we didn't have to raise taxes. There was a lot of conversation about whether we were going to increase the sales tax, or we're going to do. It was a lot of, like I say, a lot of weeds that we had to go through. But at the end of the day, we were able to pass the budget, meet the needs of the people of Texas, and we were able to give them the things that they needed. That is, we need to put more money in education. Public education has always kind of taken it on the chin, and everybody lets me know that when I come back from a session. But on the other hand, the teachers are going to get a raise. They're not going to get the $5,000 that they talked about, because that wasn't warranted that way. But I think some of them may get more than that, and it'll be more from a public standpoint, and we'll also allow them to make some decisions that the voters of the districts can vote on, which is another way it needs to be done. We want transparency. We talk about it all the time, but the only way to do that is get the voters involved.
Okay, folks, I want to thank you for joining us again. We're visiting with State Rep Dan Flynn from House District 2, brought to you by the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers. Mr. Chairman, you chair the Defense and Veterans Affairs Committee. You're on the Pensions Committee. You've been a previous chairman. Let's talk about some of the other bills that were in your wheelhouse and that were important, and start off with the church carry legislation. Got a lot of attention nationally, has received accolades. Talk about your efforts on that particular bill and what it entails, if you can.
When you come to a session, obviously the only thing we're supposed to do is the budget. We've talked about the budget, but then you want to be sure you represent your district. And in my district, there's no question. There's a lot of concern about safety in our schools and our churches, because those are the soft targets.
And we have had some events in those regards.
And so we worked on this bill. Everybody was already carrying in some of these churches, but it was illegal what they were doing.
Really?
And what we did is we made it legal, and untold number of pastors have called me and talked to me, and some of their leaders in their churches said that, you know, we feel so much more comfortable because now we know that we can actually be a front line of defense for our churches when people come in. And there's been a couple of, it wasn't a church, but the Dallas courthouse just this week, had it not been for people that were armed and ready for it could have been a disaster right there. And so the Second Amendment is not only an amendment that we should embrace, but it's one that is necessary. Our founding fathers made it the Second Amendment, and I think a whole lot of it, all you got to do is look at the various countries around the world as they take away people's right to bear arms. That's when, and you know, they're kind and they call it socialism now, but it was communism, Jim, when you and I were growing up.
Yes, it was.
And that's what we call it, and it's the same old deal. And now I see that the leadership down in Venezuela is saying, you know what, we should have never let them take all of our guns away from us. So it's all of a sudden dawning on people that when you become vulnerable to your government, you lose freedom.
Well, congratulations on your work there. Let's move to the Sunset Committee. You were a member of the Sunset Committee. A lot of folks won't know that every interim, a certain number of our Texas state agencies go through a process where they have to justify their existence and their budget. The plumbers got a lot of attention. It's more of a sensitive issue or profession than folks realize with gases and certain things, but you were involved in pulling that rabbit out of the hat. Tell us a little bit about all this plumbers commission that we've been hearing about.
It is interesting that these people that go to work every day and take care of business, we kind of take them for granted.
Mm-hmm.
But then through the sunset process, are they doing their job? Do we still need them? And I think those answers were certainly front and center for us. We did have to revamp the board of the State Board of Plumbing Examiners.
Appointed by the governor.
That's right.
Yes.
And I think by doing that, they were going to try to move it around to another agency, which was not what the plumbers wanted. It wasn't what I felt like the consensus of the sunset was. But there's always division. That's why we have a vote.
Mm-hmm.
And so as it went through that, our Chairman Sinfronia Thompson, who's my dear friend, sits next to me. She and I made a deal that we were going to save the plumbers.
Okay.
And we did, and it was one of those things that I think that the public will recognize how important they are.
Well, to talk about that, because we're also proud here in Texas that we're gaining 1,100 people a day. Some people say in Austin it's 110, 150 people a day. That's a lot of construction.
You get downtown, you think, that 1,100 is coming down to Austin.
That's right.
On the highway.
But it's a necessary industry
Yes, it
that,
is.
like you said, folks take it for granted. Talk about the sensitive nature of the industry.
Well,
that some folks may not
You're
realize.
bringing people into your home, and they're doing some pretty high caliber stuff. I mean, like you mentioned the gases. You're talking about, I tell everybody, come home some night and find that there's a busted pipe.
Yes.
And let me tell you, the havoc that is in your house and the expense it's going to cost you, you can't just say, oh, I think I'll go fix it, because it doesn't happen that way, because it destroys the water coming out, destroys carpet, furniture, walls, and so you all of a sudden you find out, you know what, that plumber is a pretty important guy. I better get him or her in here and immediately. And of course, when they come in the middle of the night, it's going to cost you. If they come in on a weekend, it's going to cost you. But on the other hand, you need them, and they do a great job. And when was the last time you had heard about a plumbing problem? They've done a pretty good job. They've had some issues that they were concerned with, and we needed to address them, and we did. The Sunset Commission did, and then it kind of got hung up in. I know it's a surprise you for me to say it, but it did get hung up in some politics.
Okay.
And that was why it didn't make it through the session. I always believed that there were other avenues, and I've said it before it was taken care of, because I knew that we had other avenues. We were not going to let the Plumbing Commission go out extinction. We're going to wait for another session. And it wasn't going to be necessary to have a special session. There were ways that we could do it, and thankfully the governor stepped right up and took care of that. And so it's going to be a smooth transition, and yet we'll still be able to make those changes that needed to be made in the board and the executive director of the State Board of Plumbing Examiners.
Okay, maybe lesser known, but certainly important. And then finally, Chairman Dan Flynn of Defense and Veterans Affairs, you were previous chairman of the Pensions Committee. Last session you solved the Houston and the Dallas police and firefighters. This session there were a couple other similar situations, primarily Galveston. Talk about the state of something that people hear about every now and then when the state of Illinois or the city of Detroit has pension problems. What did you accomplish this session? How are Texas pensions looking?
When we went into the last session, there was about 394 pensions, $66 billion in unfunded liabilities.
Wow.
The major part of it being in Houston and Dallas. And we were fortunate enough to be able to put that together and make them on a road to actuarial soundness and save the pension for the retirees, for the existing workers, and have a pension for them to come in. We still had to look after Fort Worth and Galveston. Those were the two major problems that we had.
Okay.
The mayor of Fort Worth, Betsy Price, had told me, she said, if you'll work with me, I'll get it done. and we did. We worked with her
Okay.
all through the interim, and she did. She got it done, so we didn't have to file a bill, and hats off to Mayor Price for her work there. The Galveston Bill was a unique bill because there was ascension between the city and some of their retirees.
There often can be.
And there can be, because everybody believes what they want is what was promised.
Mm-hmm.
That's not always the case, and there are extenuating circumstances that can change those things.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, the Galveston pension was passed. It was passed unanimously. So when we walk away from this session, the pensions in the state of Texas, I believe, are on an actuarial soundness or on a road to it, and feel real good, because when I look at Chicago, that whole city's going to go broke if they're not careful.
Really?
Las Vegas, Los Angeles,
Really?
New York City, and even Syracuse, New York. The pensions are one of the biggest challenges that are in our nation.
Interesting.
Talk about the Social Security.
Yes.
And you just
Similar
multiply.
situation.
It's a very similar situation. You're paying out more than you're taking in, and when that happens, that's a recipe for failure.
Okay, you have been, one final issue, if I can. Again, folks, we're visiting with State Rep Dan Flynn from House District 2 with a little session recap. Mr. Chairman, you have been a courageous conservative. You have been a pro-life champion. A lot of attention on the Chick-fil-A bill. Talk about maybe some of the pro-life issues that were addressed and taken care of this session real quick.
You know, there's not a greater company in Texas that we enjoy as Chick-fil-A.
Other than Whataburger just being
Whataburger
sold.
and Chick-fil-A. Those are all about Texas. And for them to have been turned down in the San Antonio airport was something that none of us could understand. And what it came down to is the reason was they said that they had donated money to a terrorist organization. Well, the Salvation Army has never been a terrorist organization, I don't believe, and that's who they styled as saying they'd put money into.
So because they had made a charitable contribution to a group that had been against LGBTQ or other type,
right,
typical civic organizations.
yes, and that's what was the holdup. And as far as that was concerned, I it did get hung up on a point of order, but it came back as we knew it would. And in fact, is when the governor signed that bill, I think he had a Chick-fil-A on his desk. So it's a lot of symbolism there.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is that we did have a pro-life bill that we were involved with, and that was taking care of the aborted baby. They had to give it health care when it is there after it's been aborted.
Okay.
And that was a bill that we sponsored, and very, very pleased that it had passed. And that was very important. We had a couple other pro-life bills. So I think at the end of the day, we had strong pro-life. We put money into the border. We put money with our teachers and our retirement systems, and we did all this, and we balanced the budget for the state of Texas. And I think if you just kind of roll it around, yeah, we had a great session. I'm always pleased when I leave. I want to sit down and look at what we did do, because you're kind of focused on what you do, which I don't ever want to forget that this was a session we were able to do a lot of things for our district, which budget your district, and then you go after everything else. And in our district, we were able to do some things that I think would be very helpful in the hospital. And
Well, mention a couple. I'd be interested in, I think, hearing some of them.
The Greenville Hunt County Hospital District had a major issue that they wanted to take care of, because, as you know, community hospitals are under major attack because of the expense and Obamacare has hurt them a lot, and so they had a direction that they wanted to go where they could actually have employees that were doctors.
Okay.
And that could be a challenge to some, because the Texas Medical Association didn't always agree with some of those things, but we were fortunate. They did agree with our bill. They were supportive of our bill. We were real happy, and it made the Hunt County Memorial Hospital very pleased, which I was happy to do that. And then University of Texas A&M Commerce is in my district. National championships, just to mention a few things. But anyway, they desperately needed motels, hotels, and they didn't even have a convention center. And because of there's a quirk in the law of how we can realign some of the tax dollars that are already being paid, we were able to direct them towards that, and the City of Commerce is very pleased that they're going to get some money to help them with building a hotel, so they'll have a place for all those people when we won another state national championship to take care of. Plus, they need a convention center because the city's growing greatly. 13,000 students at that great university, A&M Commerce, and so we're real pleased with it. Then we had a couple of small local bills that we always like to take care of because those are important things, and that is the reason we go down to Austin to
Yes,
represent those 285,000 people that you get to represent, along with the 30 million Texans.
Yes, well, speaking of being in Austin, you're down here wrapping some things up. I know you got a busy schedule. We're going to put a plug in the jug and appreciate you, Dan Flynn, coming in to visit with us today.
Let me tell you what, there's no group that I would rather be with than Jim Cardle.
Oh, appreciate that.
You guys have done a great job, and I've told everybody that, if you want to know someone that always tells the fair and balanced, that's your Texas Insider. That's who it is.
Well, appreciate that.
I always want to be an insider.
There you go. You're either an insider as you're not, as we always say. And we're just trying to keep up with Dan Flynn from House District 2.
Well, we're honored that you'll take time to visit with us.
Well, thank you folks for as well taking the time to visit with us and listen to our conversation with State Rep Dan Flynn from House District 2. As we said, remember, you're either an insider or you're not. I'm Jim Cardle. Thanks.